Hello, and welcome to another episode of Perspectives from the Informed Perspective. We're Penny and Jenny, and if this is your first time tuning in, we're so glad you're here. This is the podcast where we explore what it means to build thoughtful, grounded communities shaped by our local lives, but enriched by ideas and experiences from around the world. For us, meaningful change starts with listening, really listening, especially to experiences that challenge or expand our own. Today, we're talking about getting back to school. Now, I know it might feel a bit early, right? We're right in the middle of summer after all, but honestly, it can't hurt to start slowly considering what lies ahead. I'm pretty sure many of you are already, maybe at the back of your minds, occupying yourself with a few questions and considerations. So no, not just tearing your hair out because the kids are driving you round the bend 24/7. I know that I'm already running through the checklist. Lunch boxes, water bottles, name labels, shoes, calculators, school bags, uniform, everything. How best to support my kids emotionally as well if they're feeling anxious about the new school year. If you're already starting to think about this, the data shows that you are far from alone. According to the Harris poll, in the US, 89% of parents experience significant stress during the back-to-school season, jumping to 96% for parents of neurodivergent kids. In one study, over half of parents actually ranked this time of year as more stressful than Christmas. Financially, the burden of getting school ready is also real. Deloitte estimates US spending around $557 per child this year, and the consumer group OCU in Spain puts the baseline costs at just over €500, whereas the Children's Society in the UK reports parents spending around £315 for primary uniforms and up to £442 for secondary school uniforms and gear. With 93% of kids influencing buying decisions as well, brand name pressure is also real, raising the question of whether are we making enough of second-hand options like Vinted and passing on items to younger kids when ours outgrow them. Where does it make sense to buy new, and where could we potentially be making sensible savings? And beyond the wallet, social and routine struggles also make the transition tough at the start of the academic year. A study out of Romania shows 38% of parents worry most about school bullying, while Pew Research in the US found 58% of teens experience intense anxiety about fitting in at the start of that academic year. And on top of the social pressure, there's the friction of shifting gears at home. HP Australia found that 65% of parents blame holiday screen habits for making the return to structured routines feel like an uphill battle. To counter that, Cleveland Clinic sleep specialists suggest shifting back to school sleep schedules 2 to 4 weeks in advance, gently easing kids into earlier bedtimes and wake-up times before the first day alarm actually rings. Maybe there's no formula here, just noticing what our kids are feeling without letting the worry run the show, keeping things steady when we can, and somewhere in there remembering our own stress matters too. With all these thoughts and questions swirling around, we decided to invite a few experts on today who might be able to help us prepare, whether that's practical tips on buying shoes and bags or advice on providing the right emotional support for our kids and maybe ourselves. So just before we launch in and introduce everyone, I just want to share, as ever, a few quotes. Wallace Stegner in Angel of Repose. That old September feeling left over from school days of summer passing, vacation nearly done, obligations gathering, books and football in the air, another fall, another turned page. There was something of jubilee in that annual autumnal beginning, as if last year's mistakes had been wiped clean by summer. And Dr. Zeus, you're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting, so get on your way. Jim Gaffigan in an essay for CBS News. Back to school is presented in popular culture as a time of celebration for parents. Mums and dads are portrayed gleefully dancing as they buy school supplies. You'd think parents are just dying to get rid of their children. I mean, we are. We most definitely are. But sadly, along the line, back to school started to include parental obligations. And Danielle Sherman-Lazar in Living Full. Back to school means the mental load is back on high alert. The calendar fills up again. Lunches need packing, snacks, appointments, permission slips, check, homework help, the extracurricular grind, drop-offs, pickups, forgotten water bottles. It's relentless. So to the parents back in the trenches, we've got this. But wow, I miss vacation. And Ashley Rusnick, middle school health and physical education teacher, there is no tired like back to school tired. And I'm already thinking this is how I'm going to be feeling because I am loving the slow mornings right now. So on that note, Jenny, I'd love you to introduce our wonderful guest today, please.
Thank you, Penny. There's so much to talk around this, and yeah, everyone's mind's probably already bubbling, and the shops are full of it, and it's a great conversation to get started. So first up is Clare, who's the founder of Raw Movement. She's a movement educator reshaping how workplaces respond to the rising epidemic of back, neck, and shoulder pain. Instead of relying on generic wellness initiatives, cycle of injury and repair, she designs workplace physical health interventions that are rooted in autonomy, behavioural change, and the realities of modern working life. Clare delivers physical health first aid training and creates programs that help employees manage their own physical well-being for life. She cuts through overwhelming health advice, identifies what genuinely improves productivity and career longevity, and creates practical, sustainable workplaces where physical and mental health are managed side by side. And Brittany is known online as Barefoot Brit, is a guide to natural barefoot-friendly footwear for adults and children. Rather than squeezing feet into stiff, narrow traditional shoes, she works from the ground up, helping people discover stylish, minimalist footwear and showing parents where to find the best options for growing feet. She cuts through the crowded shoe market, spots what actually works for daily life, and builds custom recommendations from there. Her approach removes the guesswork from shoe shopping, making the switch effortless, practical, and stylish. And Jess is an advisor on behavioural change across schools, families, and organisations. Rather than focusing on what's going wrong, she works backwards from what you want to see more of, and then designs the conditions that make it easier and more rewarding. She understands the systemic patterns underneath, spots what's already working, and builds from there. Her approach removes the heavy hands of correction and making the shift light and playful. Okay, Penny, let's get this conversation going. And I think something I want to call out already is from the back to school things for teachers as well. So we've mentioned parents and the young people, but also like the teachers amongst our listeners that, will be already thinking ahead.
And the teachers who are also parents at the same. So here we go. So Clare, I'd love to start with you today. And actually that fits in quite nicely because I know that you also look at how to support the teachers as well. And you're looking closely at how that sudden shift back to structured school routines impacts the physical well-being. As the movement educator tackling all the physical stress of sitting, I suppose, all day at a desk, you see how that, winds and wears people down. And I think you've mentioned like teachers dealing with back and shoulder pain as they return back to their stationary routines, and kids, I guess, who've been running around being active all summer. Can you tell us what are some things that we can weave into a classroom or a workday for both teachers, I suppose, and for the children that help to keep them healthier, spines happier, joints happier, without disrupting what has to also happen in the classroom, I suppose?
Oh, thank you. Thanks for inviting me on. Yeah, it's really important that we weave movement into the school day now, because we've got a workforce that are incredibly sick due to pain, and it really needs to start in the classroom, in school. And yeah, teachers are, in my opinion, the leaders of that change. And so asking teachers to think about what their body needs day to day is where we start with it. And teachers can incorporate most stretching, most movement into their day, because they've got free rein in the class to shape the classroom how they want it. So if you're a teacher with bad back or something, you can design your own kind of, these are the moves that really help my back, and just build them into your lessons, maybe at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end of a class. There's absolutely no harm why kids can't do the same too. If there was kind of three things I would, if I was a teacher, like doing a forward bend, just touching your toes is a good one, with straight legs, stretching out the back of your body. Always love to do twists as well, so you can do that as a seated twist, or reaching up and back behind you. And the stretch that I always talk about, no matter where I teach, is calf stretching, because as we will go on to talk about, I'm sure, footwear really impacts how you move, and calf stretching is essential, really, because of the surfaces that we walk on day to day, and that our calves don't really get the full range of movement, and that impacts how we move from the floor up, really. So those are the three things I would do as a teacher.
And there's a lot of individuality as well into it. And as you were talking, Claire, you say about how the teacher can not even lead by example, but lead based on their own needs or wellness, and actually, before I go on to individuality, there's the collective benefit. Everyone, it's often said, for concentration, to get a bit of movement, you're getting, the oxygen into your brain, you're clearing your mind, you're, getting the blood stimulated. So there's all those benefits. But then to go back to the individual ones, there's particularly around the calves, there's a lot of, kids having growth spurts, the stiffness in their legs, and, the expectations, I think, of the classroom settings that we are, like, okay, they don't have to sit at the desk all the time, they can sit on the floor. But also for some children, that's not always that comfortable, or, they aren't, they can't work as well there or concentrate. So there's a lot to consider. And I really like your sort of starting point. It's like those simple basic stretches that we all know, but it seems to get overlooked. Like, it's almost we're too not scared, but it's like it's almost too basic to go back to. But that's what we're missing. And I remember when we first spoke, it's like actually just those principal considerations that a lot of us always overlook.
It kind of makes me think of, like, when you go to the gym or you do exercise, and you're meant to, aren't you, take those like 5 minutes or 10 minutes at the beginning to just ease your way in, right? Which is so important. And to ease your way out, there's like the cool down at the end. Maybe it's like something like that you need in the classroom, like, how are we placing ourselves for the day? What are we, taking on board? How are we sitting? Well, I wanted to ask Claire, though, with the schools and things, how much freedom is there with seating? Because, in my mind, I'm sort of thinking, particularly in secondary school, that the kids do, at least the way our curriculum works, they often do sit behind desks, and most of the time they don't have the opportunity to sit in different positions or have cushions or corners and things like this. Are things changing? Are you seeing stuff changing there? Is that something you'd recommend, or is it still possible to combine the two?
Yeah, I don't really see much change there, to be honest. I've worked with a couple of architects, and it's been really interesting how they design these absolutely amazing schools that flow really well, but they fill them all with chairs, which kind of makes me laugh sometimes. Like, they don't see it at all that they're restricting. I mean, they do funky spaces where there's a beanbag, or they'll have something but the majority of the time it's all about the chair. Well, we're not really built to sit in a chair, and from an early age you get told, soon as you enter school, you're trained to sit on a chair, and the most successful students are those who have the ability to sit on the chair for the longest. If you think about the jobs that people go into, success comes from being able to sit. But if you look at children by the age of like 6, they can no longer do the most natural movement is being able to squat down and pick things up from the floor. That's completely lost by a young age, and then it's a downhill slope from there, I'm afraid. Until we. So yeah, it's really difficult. I understand, because I was a teacher, that when you've got 30 kids, it's hard to say just sit anywhere. But I mean, if culturally we made that change, it would be the natural thing for kids in the classroom to pick how they want to sit. And we all know, because we've got young kids, they don't sit still, but they're like conditioned and trained to do that.
So what can teachers do then right now if they have got a room full of chairs and tables? Is it something you'd say they need to do a reset every hour? Like, what does the science say about it? How often should we be standing up? Should we be going outside the classroom? Or what can they actually do that's,
Yeah. I mean, you can put a timer on. I mean, that's one of the basic things. So you could say, oh, we don't want to sit for more than 20 minutes. But then you've got to factor in, what kind of home life has these children got? What is the baggage that they've come to school with? Where are their emotions on that day at that time? I just think it's more important to teach the children to go internally and learn what their body needs at a certain time, rather than doing a prescriptive. You can do a start of the day stretch and stuff, and there's no harm in that to teach some skills. But actually, if you look more deeply, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could read our physical health a lot better and choose to say, oh, I need to do X now for a bit. My neck's hurting from leaning over writing, or, as what is so commonly seen now, an iPad in the classroom. So yeah, I just think, yes, you can do 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off, of course, but also make it more meaningful and develop knowledge and skills about the body, that people can own their body when they leave school and go into the workplace.
Yeah, that makes me think about
a lot more learning and culture change within a school.
Yeah, that makes me think a bit of the body scan. Like, if we could, make our children aware of like that as just an exercise, to be aware, actually, where is that tension? Because it's not until you do something like that, right, that you might be like, oh my God, I wasn't aware actually that my neck is hurting.
Yeah.
So like, could be really small, subtle things that we do build in.
Yeah. And then with time, I live by what I preach, and with time, you kind of get into thinking, oh, I really need to do X. I really need to lie on the floor for 10 minutes and just reset, or I really need to stretch the back of my legs because I've been sat in a chair. And so you crave the restoration, or the challenges of feeling quite stiff, and then you know what you've got to do, and it doesn't take long, and you can actually continue to learn. It always amazes me, people can learn in a variety of ways. You don't have to be sat on a chair head over an iPad or paper and stuff to learn. So I would love school to be kind of scrapped and redesigned. That would be fantastic.
Posture, because I'm also thinking, like, we're sort of saying, let kids have the opportunity to sit how they like, and we should be able to do this. But at the same time, we do have to educate as well, don't we? How to hold ourselves, I guess. I mean, that's part of the work that you're doing as well.
Yeah. I mean, so if you look at children in general, you don't need to teach them posture, because if they move in diverse ways, climbing, jumping, reaching, all those different ways, then their body naturally aligns well it's when children don't move in diverse ways that you see postural problems arise.
Which is why we have the issues, right?
Yeah, and it's why we have the issues. And back to the chair is so damaging to the body over time, and you know that you find that the impacts in the workplace are quite huge. Yeah.
Do you have any tips for knapsacks, backpacks? Because that's another one that's like on my shopping list, and I hate them. Like every year, I think I found the one, and then the strap falls off. Oh my God, how many times does the strap fall apart? Then my daughter, oh my God, she's in secondary, she's 7. It's so heavy. I mean, I can't carry it. It's like she's taking 2 dumbbells to school with her every day. Do you have any tips? I'm not asking for a brand, but what should we be looking out for?
I don't have any brands because I'm so out of it with 2 older teenage kids, but generally I would say always have it strapped on your back for a start off with both shoulders.
Not cool.
Like you see so many children have it on one shoulder and then they're leaning forward. That is the kind of safest way, I think. When you think about the weight, I don't think the weight is a problem at all. You hear people say about the weight. I think, unless it's excessively, weighs a lot.
If it's one-shouldered, I'm thinking.
Yeah, if it's shouldered, and it's always on the same shoulder, teaching kids that to balance it out and be central is important. And also, as we'll go on to learn, footwear, if they've got rubbish shoes, it pushes the center of gravity forward onto their toes, so you're loading your toes more. And then if you combine that with the weight of a bag, you could be damaging their feet and their body, pelvic floor, core health. It's all a whole body issue. You're fine to carry weight. We're really strong, but it's just how you do that and what you do to restore your body afterwards. So if you're holding something on your back, how do you strengthen your front to ensure that you're balanced out front and back in terms of your overall strength?
Thank you, Claire. Well, that touched in really nice. Now to move on to Britt with shoes. I'm just thinking at the moment about shuffling feet. Actually, that's another one. So I'm wondering now, like with shoes and everything else. I want to really kind of know. It's that time of the year. You get the list. You got the black leather shoes that you need to go out and buy for multiple children. First thought for me is, Clark's or wherever, these traditional things. We've been fed that narrative from our parents, whatever. And I'm fascinated now by the barefoot thing. I'm like, I need to buy some of these. But then again, I think, oh God, can I drop them from like a hard leather shoe into a barefoot shoe? Will they like it? So tell us a little bit, like how can we make that transition if we wanted to, and what are the benefits of that for
So that's a really good question, and one that I actually don't come across too often. And I think that's because my audience is largely divided between parents of really young kids that are getting into their first shoes, and then adults that have worn regular, structured, supportive shoes for their whole life, and then they wish to transition. And it's really individual. I'll preface that by saying it's very, very individualistic. Young kids that have been barefoot and that are starting to wear footwear really don't have a transition period, but then damaged feet on the other end of the spectrum will need a certain amount of time, depending on what damage is done to the feet already, whether that's structural damage or muscle damage, etc. But I wouldn't stress about it. For me personally, I didn't have much of a transition period when I started wearing barefoot shoes. And that was largely lifestyle related, because I discovered barefoot shoes personally about 10 years ago, towards the end of my first maternity year. So my son was toddling. I'd been at home, trapped in the house, as you do, over the winter with a winter baby. So I'd mostly just been in socks or no shoes at all. So when I started to wear barefoot shoes, they just felt like slippers. And I'm not really an active person, I'll be honest. So I wasn't really like hammering it with the miles. So I had a really natural ease into all of this new muscle function. And what tends to happen is when you start wearing barefoot shoes, especially that first time, or maybe the day after that first time, you'll feel, oh, you know, that productive muscle ache that you feel after you've started working out or you've just joined a gym. You're literally waking up muscles that have been dormant. And it's that and that sort of epiphany that comes after you've tried barefoot shoes that you start to realize those are the muscles that I've got. We have a very large concentrated number of muscles and ligaments and joints in our feet, and nobody actually exercises them. Even the top gym influencers of the world, they'll go and do their biceps, triceps, and everything else in the core, but they're all wearing structured and cushioned shoes, and they're not actually moving their feet, which really, you know, baffles me. So yeah, it's you can get footwear now that is like more transitional, they call it, with a thicker sole. And you could even, I think the way forward with that is actually just going straight to barefoot shoe brands, but perhaps getting thicker insoles that help you with that. You know, it can be a bit of a shock, especially if you're walking inside a school all day. But I think children are very resilient, and the earlier that they adapt, the quicker they will get used to barefoot shoes. As I said, it is a different feeling, but it also ultimately feels very natural, and the whole body is affected because, as Claire touched on, it is a whole system problem. But once you start from the ground up fixing these things, you talked about the weight of a backpack. And as Claire rightly pointed out, if you're wearing structured traditional shoes that raise your heels and push that body weight unevenly onto your toes, those toes in that shoe are already very heavily restricted. So they can't even compensate in that moment. So that's why the beauty of barefoot shoes or foot-shaped shoes actually means that all of that additional weight not only will fall in the correct and natural position on a correctly postured foot, because it will be flat on the ground, but also even if the foot moves throughout the day, the toes are not restricted, so they're not going to be strained or compensating for any additional weight that they shouldn't have, because in a barefoot shoe they've got that room to splay out. And the big toe in particular is the most important one for the foundation of our posture and our body weight distribution, stability. And then that's not even talking about proprioception, which is our foot has actually got thousands of nerve endings. So all of that information that we receive through the sole of our shoes from the floor continues to help us with our natural posture and our gait as we walk. And again, that body weight, and it really helps our brain know exactly how to walk. Lots of people ask me, you know, what about walking on different surfaces? But our feet and the whole human body is so adaptable. We are absolutely, you know, we're machines at the end of the day, but we're also intelligent beings. So our foot and our brain have this amazing connection, which is so massively overlooked by everyone at the moment, because we're so guided by fashion and tradition. But actually, if you just take the foot and just even up to the ankle, it is a marvelous system that is so highly adaptable and literally ready for anything. And so high school or even junior school is the perfect prime time to definitely get kids wearing barefoot shoes, to embrace that natural ability of strengthening and just operating the body as it's meant to be, despite the environment that we find ourselves in with desks, you know, and hard floors. If we allow the equipment and the environment to change somewhat to allow us to continue to adapt. Because what I find is with traditional environments such as desks and chairs and footwear, our body is actually maladapting. So we are compensating so heavily on structured, narrow, restrictive shoes that we fail to move our body in certain ways. And that's how, over time, as Claire mentioned, the workforce is a sick workforce, because we've been so mistreating our bodies from the get-go.
I was just thinking as well, sorry, really quickly, was that now is the perfect time maybe to be doing it, because we've all been in flip-flops all summer.
Absolutely. And a lot of people tell me
normally when you go back to putting kids into school shoes and they're like, no, I can't wear it.
And also, so there's 2 points I want to raise there. So many people come to me and say, oh, I love summer because I'm always in my flip-flops. And then particularly in the pandemic, so many people lived without their regular footwear. And then when that was over, you go back to your trainers, and they're just sneakers. They shouldn't, really they shouldn't be restrictive. But when people do then put their shoes back on after a long summer of freedom, your feet know. And this is it. We put them on and think, oh gosh, they're really tight. Oh, it must be me. It's a me problem. It's a my foot problem. And then you just ignore it. And then you train your brain and your body to compensate and ignore and just get used to it. And that is something that I think we're all guilty of when we're raising children. Children are, in my experience, are very naturally intuitive. They understand and they know their own bodies. And it's our job as parents to continue to help them cling on to that natural ability of understanding their own bodies. And what do we all do when we get told by grandmother to go down to Clark's, get them fitted, put them in shoes? You can walk now, so wear these shoes. And the children, typically in my experience, don't like that restriction for various reasons. And I think the main one is the sensory aspect. And they feel that restriction because they're no longer receiving the information that the brain needs for them to move naturally. So they just want to whip them off. But we as parents think that maybe they're being naughty or they're being challenging. And we basically force, in the delicate most use of the word, force them to continue to maladapt to that new concept and new sensory feeling. And so we then typically get to our 30s, and it's not before we have children ourselves that we think, oh, now for me, I learned that children typically don't like the early days of wearing shoes because we literally have to force them to learn to get used to it. And all along they've been screaming, no, it feels unnatural to us, and we should be listening.
And I thought as well, so just speaking from my personal experience of one of my sons, shoe fitting was never ideal. And I was like, oh, he's got a wide foot.
Yeah, and it's his problem, his feet, he's
yeah, and then you look for wide shoes, but we're in Poland and there isn't, you don't have the Clarks that do the wide fit. And then I thought, this is all just, he needs the shoe that just fits his foot. It's like, why am I having to go and search for? So there are certain brands that are wider fitting, and this is how I got into considering it for him. But for me, the important thing that touches on a lot of the things you've shared, Britt, is that for him, it's that basic comfort. He's not a shoe refuser, but the grounding, like at school. So we're learning that he's got, kind of sensory, kind of physical, developmental needs. Nothing extreme, but really fascinating kind of smaller things that you might never have identified. And one of them is around his core, but that all goes back to his feet, and he needs that stability starting from his feet. And you made me think of it, Claire, and sorry I wasn't able to contribute at the time. But these chairs, the school has got fantastic orthopedic chair or ergonomical correct chairs, but their feet are not on the ground. And my son needs his feet to be on the ground so that it can support his core stability, this in this example, to support his neck, to support his reading. That's something I learned recently, that his struggles with reading have other reasons why he struggles, but it's because of his core stability, which goes back to your feet. Now, this is another nuance, and it's a bit specialist here, but you'll find it, Britt, as you've moved to Poland, they have an indoor shoe culture here, right?
Yeah.
So you send them to school in trainers, which I think are not the best, but like the most comfortable. they're not in that all day. So I've been putting them in pathetic shoes. Yeah. Just because I was like, oh, you just need an indoor shoe. It's like a slipper. And then I've overlooked actually his needs and the time and what his body is saying. And we're making that link a lot to the physical. And Jess, I can't wait to hear from you as well. But the physical and the mental connections and needs and the brain's signaling. But it's so easily overlooked. And you're like, actually, we could talk about uniform as well, how restricting and uncomfortable uniform is, and the choices you've got can even get into what the girls can wear versus what the boys can wear. And they're sort of squeezed into these conformities, you know, because culturally you might have a different, you know, you have to wear this type of shoe indoors, and maybe we don't understand the right decisions to make. But yeah, I think that footwear is a really nice place to start, and without sounding cringy here, because it starts from there and up. You know, it's the basis, it's the ultimate foundation.
If you think about it, you know, if you were to decide to take up a sport or any kind of movement activity like joining the gym, I think the first thing most people would do is go and buy themselves some appropriate clothing. And typically that appropriate clothing would be clothing that allows you to move naturally and without restriction. And it always makes me have a little internal chuckle when I look at shoes for movement, you know, in the mainstream industry of footwear. And if you look at traditional English PE pumps, which are specifically designed for PE lessons at school, and yet they are quite heavy, rubber soled, and very, very tapered. So we're teaching children, yes, you can wear a nice comfortable polo shirt and some sports shorts, but your toes need to be bound together at the front of that really stiff canvas shoe. And it's always just perplexed me that nobody seems to go, well, hang on a second, if I'm supposed to be moving my body here, why can't I include my feet in that? It's strange. And then I do really believe that, especially as you've mentioned your son and your own experience, he is going to be largely affected by the restriction of his feet. And it you know, for some people that haven't ever considered footwear in this context, or, you know, their feet are fine. Like I hear that all the time. Oh, I'm 42 and my feet are fine. Well, aren't you the lucky one? You are one of the human, because I mentioned earlier, humans are very adaptable. So for their whole life, their feet have just adapted and gotten used to it. And, you know, actually, if you dig deeper, you might find that that individual does struggle with lower back pain or short calves, or, you know, you can unpick all of these little things, but they'll never admit that it could be their footwear. But when it comes to school uniform policies in particular, I genuinely believe, I mean, I know that some schools can be quite strict with that, particularly in the United Kingdom, because they're rooted in tradition. But I don't believe I've ever come across a policy that explicitly states anything that a barefoot shoe is not appropriate in school. I think you will find that the uniform policy at worst will say black polishable, you know, formal shoes, but it will never say it needs to have a heel, it needs to be solid in structure, it needs to be supportive. It won't say, they won't dare say those things. And a lot of people come to me and say, oh, I can't have my child wearing barefoot shoes at school. And I'm like, what? That's because you probably think that barefoot shoes are toe shoes or water shoes, or, you know, something ghastly looking or active wear. But no, you can actually now get a significantly huge variety of school shoes, or shoes designed for school, or that meet those formality requirements. And, you know, who is it that decided that a pointy winkle picker is a formal shoe, you know? And why does your son need to have a formal looking, you know, dress shoe for the learning environment? It's absolutely backwards. And I think a lot of people realize that restriction of movement, whether that's the body in the chair or the feet in the, you know, stiff shoes, really has an impact through the system up to the brain. Because if their feet are screaming silently all day, you know, I'm uncomfortable, this is so restrictive, then it is going to impact their distractibility, their concentration, and they're going to be otherwise engaged on what their body's screaming. And we want to teach the children to listen to their bodies, so we need to match that with the environment that we're providing for them.
Yeah, or as I've learned, subconsciously their brain is taking too much effort. They're not even aware, like they might not hear
a sensory block, for sure.
There isn't screams, you know, but their brain is having to do so much adjustments.
And it might take a long time to work out what that route is. So this is why barefoot shoes are absolutely wonderful for I believe the majority of people.
I feel like I'm coming in a bit late, but just really briefly, how would you define what a barefoot shoe is? Like,
yeah, started with that.
There are so many brands in the meantime that offer them. So, like, if you're saying there are options for school,
there's lots of
Tell me really
options.
briefly.
But the industry is getting quite noisy as it became, you know, and it's a niche industry, but it's growing mainstream. Actually, if the readers or listeners are in the UK, there are so many brands on the high street now. So, for example, Next and Asda and Zara, even Decathlon, they are all selling what constitutes as a barefoot shoe. So in order to be classed as a barefoot shoe or a natural, what's the word I'm looking for, minimal shoe, you are looking for something that is flat for natural posture, thin for better sensory feedback from the ground, flexible for natural movement, and an anatomical shape for correct toe splay, which again leads into posture. But also the fifth element of a barefoot shoe is that it has to be securely attached. So you might be thinking, okay, well, a flip-flop could be shaped like a foot, or it doesn't affect or restrict the natural toe splay. It can be flat, thin, and flexible. But that fifth one is very vital for the movement of the toes, because if you're clinging your foot to so like Crocs, for example, especially when they're not in sports mode, are pretty bad because you're moving your toes incorrectly. And Claire might interject and, you know, mention the pelvic floor is greatly impacted by the toe movement there. So all of these things that we just massively overlook in footwear are actually vital for movement, natural movement as a whole in the entire body.
Okay. And so typically, it's what I've learned from exactly what Britt said, but it's like they typically look wider. Like you can see that obviously, and that's for the natural splay, and that's what's challenged my mind of this like wider fitting need of shoes. And it's like, actually,
do you really need wide fit, or do you just need a natural shape?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's that's how it's quite identifiable as well. So for example, these on high street brands will have it as, they won't go under as a classification yet, but certain versions of a shoe will be barefoot and you'll see it's wider.
Yeah.
And how do you test that flexibility? Is there like a rule of thumb?
No, there isn't. There are machines out there that you can test that flex, but I'm not too scientific with it. I just like to be able to roll from the back, so the heel rolls into and then the toe goes over it. I like the shoes that you can do that with one hand, you know, roll it into the, you know, like a snail shell in one hand. This is the thing, there is no standardization yet, and this is where the waters get muddy and the industry is getting noisier, because Asda have just launched their first barefoot shoe. There's room for improvement because the sole is, in my opinion, still quite stiff. And I think the stiffness of the sole is very much linked to that old traditional support and a supportive structured shoe. And that's probably why they've done it. Or it might just be an incidental, oh, that's quite good, because then it reaches that audience that still want to cling on to those cultural traditions in footwear. But it isn't as flexible as, say, for example, the Next option. Next do a very, very flexible yet fairly narrow option, whereas the Asda one is not so flexible, but it is much wider. So there's lots of options, but personally, if I would be advising the listeners to go to my website, I have a whole school shoes section. It's pretty impartial. There's lots and lots of options on there for wider fit, for girls, for boys, for older girls, because obviously I know that cutesy Mary Janes with a bit of embossed leather is not going to hit quite right for your 14-year-old. So there are multiple options, and it still is a little bit unclear as to what would be best for your child and their foot shape. But we're working on those resources, because again, it can be a bit of a minefield. But I offer, you know, one-to-one help through social media, DMs and email. People are always welcome to ask.
And what about buying online, just really quickly? Is that like a huge taboo? Would you go never, ever, ever? Or would you say there are sometimes circumstances?
Well, unfortunately, you can only really get barefoot shoes online at the moment. It's only just in the UK in particular coming into the high street, and there's very few options in physical stores. I would always encourage people to, you know, it's not very environmentally friendly, but there are some retailers that offer free returns because they know it's such a headache to be finding the ideal shoe. It is a challenge. That's why, you know, I write so many resources to help people have a really informed decision on what they're actually buying. It is a minefield at first. It gets easier to measure and to know the brand, but typically once you've found the right brand and the right fit and you get on well with it, you know that they're a safe bet for next time. But yeah, buying online is the only way, really.
And Britt, I'm interested in your thoughts, and then also I really want to hear from Jess as well about this kind of fitting in and the pressure and the social pressures of returning to school or changing year. So from the shoe perspective and the barefoot concept, like, what would you say to people who would, okay, perhaps they don't understand the range or the breadth of design choices, because gosh, I'm learning that, and from you being at the expo this weekend, you can just see that it's remarkable. But what would you say to people who are like, so okay, let's take a young 12-year-old girl whose mum that might be on this podcast might propose that she considers or looks at some links of barefoot shoes because of all the benefits that we've spoken about. Their preconception or their initial judgment of how they might look from a fashion point of view.
I mean, not gonna lie, this is very philosophical. It's going to take work. It's going to take a whole mind shift, mind shift, perspective shift. It's up and coming, but the fact that the niche is growing globally so much, I'm really hoping that it becomes more acceptable, especially by the time my kids grow up, because I can only imagine what it's like to have a preteen. And my sister actually, thankfully, they're boys, so they're slightly easier to deal with when it comes to fashion, but they have started, especially the last 6 months, exhibiting preferences and style aesthetic, and it's a little worry in the family of like, oh, what are we going to do about their shoes when they realize that they're not considered fashionable. There are some up and coming fashion forward brands that are offering something that doesn't look too duck feet or too hideous, but again, it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot of reinforcement from the parents that this is the correct thing. It's for your health. I do have friends in the industry that have been there, done that, and they've got now 15, 16, 17-year-olds. Sometimes it's a case of you're going to have to let go and just stay true to the core and keep modeling that's what we do. I think there are some parents that allow them to make their own choices, and then 6 weeks later the shoes are still in the box because they realize as soon as they bought that fashion trend, it's painful, and because they might have had already experience of barefoot shoes, we hope they'll realize very quickly that there's an immediate comfort difference. So it's a very, very tough balance between aesthetics at the moment and encouraging the children to make the right decision. I know that there are individual differences as well. Like my 9-year-old, he's exceptionally headstrong. He obviously listens to everything I say. Not that I preach it, but obviously this is my day job. So it's topical in our house all of the time when we're looking and inspecting shoes. So he's like me. He's like a miniature advocate of barefoot shoes. And I actually did see a huge shift in their old school. Some people may not know that we've just moved recently, so they'll be going to a new school soon. But at the old school, we had a really unusually high percentage of children actually wearing barefoot shoes under the age of 9. And I won't put it all down to me and my family, but I think that social influence and minority influence is still powerful, because it takes one and it just takes another impressionable person that actually thinks, well, that is logical. And then you've got to have that backed up by parents that are willing to maybe do a bit of research or put the money where, behind it, because barefoot shoes, again, are not so cheap unless you are looking at those high street brands. So, it's, if you looked at the Venn diagram or pie chart of this whole philosophy, it's going to take time, but we just have to keep encouraging the children to make healthy decisions. And it's the same with anything that's perceived as unhealthy, like sugar intake and smoking.
And get them in them and experiencing them where you can. And that might just be, say, for example, their tennis shoe,
exactly. Or even their slippers. If you can buy even barefoot slippers, or like you say, casual shoes, anything that they're willing to actually wear, because I can only imagine how difficult it is to get a child to agree to wear something. But typically I would find that once they've experienced the comfort. Like, it is such a natural and logical feeling that it is undeniable, you know. And then when it comes to the next purchase of any shoes, you can go, well, should we have a look at the barefoot options, because there's millions, you know. And people have always said to me, what am I going to do? What am I going to do on that terrible day where my children begin to reject barefoot shoes based on their, you know, friends and conformity and whatnot? And I think the truthful answer is, I hope that we never come to that. But the second thing is, hopefully the industry will be so far ahead than where it is now, that there will be more options. So probably what I would suggest to my eldest, or any of my children, of course, is let's have a look at what's available in the barefoot market first and see if those will work for you. And if we really get to the point, which at the moment, I think there's so much choice that maybe would never come to this, but if they were adamant that they wanted, you know, what Billy's wearing on the playground, then I would probably make them work for it. I'd suggest that they earned the money to go and buy that purchase that they really want. And then we'll take it from there. And hopefully, you know, the foundation that we as parents give the children to make those healthy choices. Because at the end of the day, parents are not dictators, right? We can try our best to instill the best behaviors, but we really can't force these young people to do as we do. We can only set the example and those foundations, and hope that they return to those beliefs after they've gone and experimented and lived life a little bit themselves, you know. That's the best way to approach it, right? Because at the end of the day, it's their feet.
And I'm kind of thinking about that when you get that back to school list of all the things that you need to buy, maybe it is worth like taking a moment and like going through it and thinking, well, do I agree with what's on there, or is there an alternative? And just mixing it up a bit and trying out new stuff and seeing if that works better for you.
And also discussing it with your child, because I think it is easy to slip into the rhythm of, okay, well, we've always got the shoes from there, so let's just go and get your next size. But really, if you as the parent have actually discovered that there are better options, before saying, hey, would you wear these, sit with your child and say, you know, I've been thinking about a lot about, you know, movement, natural posture, and I've discovered these shoes that actually might be so comfortable for you. You might love them. Do you want to have a look? You know, really, I would definitely involve them in the process for sure.
I love that. Right, I'd love to turn to Jess now, please. Hi, Jess. Lovely to have you here today. We've been talking at the beginning in the introduction about like getting back to school and that kind of cascade of events that, you know, hits us quite hard. So we're going to have, you know, suddenly the extra sports clubs and the homework and all the activities and expectations. How do we spot the subtle signs if our child is silently or potentially getting a bit overwhelmed? And what can we do really to support them, I suppose, and help them if they feel like there's too much going on? Do you have some tips and recommendations?
Yeah, definitely. And it's so true, isn't it? There's so many things that we're throwing at our young people. I mean, even just these conversations, it's just extra layers that are to be considered. And as we've said throughout the conversation today, every young person is different. So maybe it transpires that they're shutting down and they're not talking as much anymore, or maybe it's the complete opposite. They're throwing a fit at everything, or, you know, they're shouting back at you, or they're not listening to you, or it could be so many different things. I would also really keep an eye on what changes. So maybe that's sleep, maybe that's appetite, maybe that's focus, but you'll spot within your child what's different. And it, you know, I think the background of this is really important, that for young people starting around the time that they start secondary school, actually, they're starting to go through these massive brain changes. You know, the prefrontal cortex at this point is not connected. So no real working memory and emotional regulation, both of those are kind of properly under construction at the moment. So all these extra layers, they're not just going to impact it, they're going to mean it stops working. So I think that's really important to have in mind what's actually going on for them, and for them to be brought in, as Britt was saying, like, let's bring them into this conversation. Let's help them to understand what they're going through. I don't know about you guys, but I had no idea that this was what was happening. Actually, I just didn't have that capacity for that. And And I think so often these days we talk about resilience, don't we? Like, you just need more resilience. But actually, that's absolutely not the case here. It's not about resilience, it's about redesign. And it's about involving the young person in that redesign. And I think if we were to sit down and speak to our young people and say, okay, what are you really great at? Or what's the thing that you really love? Let's focus on that. Most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time they're like, I don't know, I'm not good at anything, or, I love it all, or, just kind of, sometimes it's hard, isn't it, to understand what your skills are and what your strengths are at any age, let alone when you're still developing in so many ways. So this is where I think we could have a bit of fun. And there's so many different ways we could do this. But some of the ways I quite like is like, right, okay, let's between us write down all the different activities, all the different sports. Let's each have different pieces of paper. Let's write them all down. Let's put them face down. And now we're just going to play a game. I'm going to pick one up. And what you see, first word that comes to mind. So maybe it's freedom, or maybe it's, it doesn't even have to be a proper word. It can just be like a expression of what comes to you when you see that word. And then just make a note of them. And then you're starting to build a picture. And the other thing that I really like to do, which is very kind of systemic and it's somatic, as Clare will kind of testament to, is write same pieces of paper, blindfold the young person and get them to stand on the bits of paper so they don't know what they're standing on. And just them stand there and see what comes up when they stand on that space. And, it may be nothing, but it may be some really important information there. And it taps into these different wisdoms that we're not really teaching our young people that often. It's not just all about the brain. We've got the gut, we've got so many other parts of us, the heart, that really are part of our intelligence. And I think we were talking earlier about really getting our young people to understand when their body's telling them something. And that's the same kind of thing. They are intuitive. We get rid of these skills. So if we can learn to enhance them in every aspect, they are going to be so much more confident in their decisions and in who they are. And I just think it's such a beautiful way, like even small little things, we can bring in these other wisdoms. And I think never holding it too tightly. Like potentially you might look at it and be like, what? When I stood in football, it said I felt rubbish. That's so not true. It's like, okay, well, that's information in itself, isn't it? Like, it doesn't need to be accurate. When everything's an experiment, suddenly we give ourselves permission to play. Like, it doesn't have to be certain. We can try. Why don't we try dropping that and see what happens? See how you feel. And then if it doesn't feel right, it's not the end of the world. We can bring it back. But yeah, I think having this freedom to play and discover and to listen to our body and to understand why these things are happening. And then we're also focusing on what's working. Like, what is it that really lights you up? What is it that really excites you? That's going to give you energy. And also the space we create by then saying no to things and realizing that actually, whenever we say yes to something, we're saying no to something anyway. But it gives them space for their nervous system and their brain to actually have the space to develop, which is fundamental. So that's probably kind of the route that I would take.
I'm just thinking as you're talking as well, when it comes, you get those lists and these are the clubs and these are the activities and these are the extracurricular things. You come in, don't you, when it's still kind of summer and we still have these like really long days where it still seems really accessible and easy, right? You go to bed, it's still light, whatever. But that winter term, autumn, winter is so long, right? I mean, I just remember it as a kid and there's long, like, getting dark so early and everything. And when you were talking about that, it's one thing to begin the things with all that energy at the beginning of the school year, but you potentially are losing your battery as the time goes by. And then being able to also say that's okay. And there is a point when if it is too much for you, can always stop it or swap it or do something else.
And I think that's such a good point, Penny. Like, to learn to do a bit of a battery energy inventory. It's something that only as an adult I've learned to do. And it is so important, isn't it? Like, where are you at? What gives you energy? What's taking away from it? Like, these are all such incredible things that we could teach our young people and have conversations. And it shifts it to something that's, oh, we've got to stop because you can't handle it, to we're going to stop because you've noticed about yourself, what lights you up and what drains you. And that's what a beautiful skill to teach.
And what's quite motivating, Jess, in how you speak is it doesn't always have to have an explanation or a rhyme or reason why. And that experiential approach, it's like, what it doesn't, you might not know why you don't want to do tennis anymore, but actually there's something telling you physically, emotionally, that it's just not for you. And actually to give space to that, okay, there'll be certain, not saying tennis is necessarily the one, but some people, there's all the benefits, but there'll be certain things that should be encouraged, and maybe there's also the mindset of not giving up and perseverance, and you said resilience, but actually allowing this might not feel good at the moment, so let's see if there is flex in it, or how we approach it. So you can actually go along to tennis every week and not want to, but we'll just do it, and then we'll check in, and then we'll see. And if you're really unhappy, rather than we all get, I think you've touched on it, Penny, naturally, but there's, we quickly get back into I was going to say the rat race, but just the routine and getting sucked into it all, that sort of, that's taken with the time. We've got to do it, and it becomes so circular. But actually, we can step out from it, and we can show our children that you can stop it for a while and you can return to it, or you can not enjoy something but actually find the joy in it again at a later date. So that's quite a nice, I think, quite a nice refreshing approach, from what you said as well, because we have to start as we mean to go on, but that doesn't always have to be the same way that we'll continue for the rest of the year.
What about continue, Jess, sorry.
Well, no, I think that's such a great point, Jenny, and also for them to have a voice that's heard. There's lots of lessons, aren't there, like you've got to continue, you hear this, but actually what's the most important thing is that you learn to listen, and that we can reflect. We have a space where we think, okay, how was it not going to tennis today? How is that sitting in your body? How are you feeling? And maybe there aren't any words, and that's also okay. We don't have to have explanations, because the body does have a wisdom. And we're so used to, aren't we, like having to explain ourselves. And I think we over-explain and over-correct. And actually, if we can have a place of trust where, like, I trust you on this, and I trust that if it changes, we can have that conversation.
It's trust and listen to your body.
Yeah. What about, like, of course, there are also children and people as well who bottle it all up, manage all day long, look like they're doing great, get through the front door at home, and then massive meltdowns, right? This is also potentially, how can we support our kids if they are having that issue when they're getting home and they're full of emotion? How can we support them better?
Yeah, that's such a great point, Penny. And I think the fact they feel safe enough to be able to let it out when they're home is the first thing that we need to be grateful for. I find so often with our young people that, we want to find out right there and then what happened, but actually they need a bit of space. They need a bit of downtime. And so often it's not, how was it? It's, what did you notice? And I often find it's at bedtime, like just going to lie and like actually carving out some time, be like, look, let's have half an hour at bedtime. I'll come up, lie on your bed with you. We can talk if we want, we don't have to, but just know that that is your time. Like, make sure there's some, ring fence time where they know if there is anything to say, they can absolutely offload it there. And I think it's so nice when you're not sitting, straight in front of someone, either when you're next to someone in the car or you're going for a walk, or at bedtime lying next to them. I just think that creates a safe space where often, I mean, it depends on the time of year, doesn't it? But sometimes it's dark. Either way, you're not really staring at each other. It's not intense. Like, you can talk if you want to, but it's actually quite nice just to lie, and, you can have a few questions that you could ask lightly. Again, no need for a response. I think so often we're looking for answers to reassure us, whereas actually what we need is just to create a space for them. This is a judgment-free zone. And if there really is something that I'm really worried about, I'll tell you. But otherwise, you can just say whatever's on your mind, you know, and there's no such thing as a silly question or a silly answer. I think to provide that safety, you know, you've already provided it because they're able to release when they get home. But then just that next step, I think, is simple but really powerful.
Yeah. Do you have any tips when it comes to getting kids more involved in the getting ready for school? They're getting their bags ready, getting their kit together, making sure they've got everything in their bag. I don't know, is there something we could do visually, cues, or anything that we would suggest that might help? Because, you know, it's hard going back to the rigmarole of it and working out what you need for each day, so that also we can give them a bit of ownership for that as well, so it's not just mum running around like a headless chicken doing it all for them, or dad for that matter.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, and I think it's a whole philosophy. So it doesn't just start with the school bag or the back to school. This is how can we involve them in all their decisions. And so I would give this question to them. Look, okay, we've got 6 weeks now, but we are going to be going back to school. How would you like to do it? Like, what could be some ways? Why don't we brainstorm?
Not go back at all, Jess, would be my kid's answer.
Yeah, I mean, we could try that, but what would be the consequences if we did that? I mean, you know, no answer is actually a stupid answer, because actually some kids get to be homeschooled. Some kids, you know, it is a possibility, and it's like, okay, so what would happen if we chose that path? You know, let's play with it. Because I think when that's kind of the thing, when kids get slammed straight away, it's like, okay, well, you know, you asked me and I told you. And it's like, yeah, actually, what would happen if we didn't go back to school? Let's follow that. Like, where would we end up? Maybe because the world is changing so much, we could just get you on an AI course and learn to, you know, do all this, and you could be a millionaire from 14 and you're fine. But what would you miss out on? What would you miss if you didn't go back to school? How would you feel that your friends were all going there every day? You know, kind of, and that's, I think, part of it is that we kind of become slightly childlike ourselves again, rather than having these set things. It's like, well, no, you go to school. That is what we do. It's like, okay, yeah, what would happen if we did that? And so then we've decided, yeah, actually, we all are on board. We want to go back to school because actually we want to break from each other as well. And we want to see our friends, and we do want to learn, and maybe we really want to learn a language. Or is there one subject you really want to learn? Maybe it's that the art class have so many different materials and you're really excited to get involved in that. And okay, so maybe we could also do a bit of that at home, or, you know. But then in terms of actually getting ready for school, whether it's the uniform, the bags, the books, the stationery, I'd say to them, okay, how can we do it? Like, how could we make it fun? Like, what would need to be involved? Is it a treasure hunt? Should we put a list? And should we see who can find the best price? Or like, what could be our reward when we do it? Like, if we do all these things in the first 2 weeks, if we manage to tick them all off, what could we do to celebrate? Because that could be really fun, right? Like, okay, what day are we going to do today? What are we going to try and tick off? Because we really want to go to Thorpe Park, or we really want to go to the, I don't know, the spa, or whatever it is we decide to do to celebrate. And then you're not only enjoying the process, you're embedding. I think always we just want to reward the behavior we want to see. If that's always our kind of guiding star, then it embeds. It's incredible. Like, even the smallest, I mean, the loads, you've got so many of the psychologists saying now, every time you do something, even if you just go, yeah, that the body is then like, oh, okay, so I get rewarded when I do something. Right, I want to do that thing more and more and more. So yeah, I think play around with it.
It's the sustainability, though. I always think, like, my kids get on board with it. It's great for 2 weeks, and then it's like, boom. The same with like the chores at home. We have a wonderful like board, and we make it beautiful, and it's all exciting, and it works for a bit, and then it's dead.
I'd love to make a practical suggestion, if I may.
Yeah, please.
It's something I've always found really helpful with my family, because I'm not very productive if my space is very scattered. And I'm also, as somebody that's always liked to do Montessori parenting, I'm not a huge fan of extrinsic motivation, because like you said about the sustainability. So a way that I've really encouraged intrinsic motivation with mine is that I let them help me with the laundry. And all of my children have their own 5-tier shelf specifically for their school wear. And obviously it works whether you've got a uniform or not, because you can just set out exactly the 5 outfits for the day. And they've got their own named piece of furniture that's got exactly 5 pigeonholes, just enough for their daily uniform. And I involve them heavily right the way, all the way through the school year with their uniform. So on a Sunday night, usually they would put it all away. So they've got the exact thing that they need, because it's really useful for the younger ones when they wake up. You know, you have limited time in the morning. You don't really want to be stood there with a checklist, especially when you've got 4 children. And so by the time, you know, now I've got a 9-year-old, he doesn't really need that piece of furniture, but he is so motivated to help me with the chores of the weekend, because he already has learned that if he hasn't prepared that, just that area of his bedroom, you know, I allow them to live freely, but that routine of being involved in preparing for your week and being your future friend is a reward in itself. Because trust me, if you haven't prepared and you are the mess and you're holding up the family in the morning, like, you don't want to be in that position. So that's what motivates my children to have a smooth.
Yeah, I love that, because I was at the end of, I was just going to say, I got to the end of like the last academic year and I still was like, what day is it today? What sport is it today? Oh my God. Like my youngest, he had to take, I think his games kit, either had to wear it in and then take the normal one with him, or it was the other way around. But then sometimes it was an after school.
And I've had an open and honest conversation with all of my children, because I've said to them, look, guys, I am not actually capable, because there's so many of you. I can't be responsible for all of your gear, whether it's the right uniform on the right day, or taking your swimming bag with you, or having the right diary, or whatever. You guys need, I'm begging you to try to take some onus of responsibility, because I physically can't do it. And there's been plenty of times when I'm thinking of my second born, because he's a classic second born. He doesn't have that frontal cortex connection to be as responsible as I would love him to be. But we have changed our home environment and designated areas of the house and our routines specifically to help me out, help them. I have to help me help them, because, and they need to help me help them too, because if it was left to just me and him naturally, he would never have his school bag with him. Never. Because I will forget to get it in the car, and he's not physically capable of remembering to get it in the car either. So it's about learning the individual characters that you've got in the house, and physically changing the configuration of the furniture has helped me the most.
It's like accessibility again, isn't it? You know,
prepared environment.
Yeah, something that keeps coming up as well is like these expectations that we might have, or society might have, or traditions might have, and that we have to kind of make that accessible for us and adaptable for us. And I think, you know, just those small tweaks, you know, can my child get his own breakfast? Yes, he can, but can he reach it? No, because I put it all out there. So make it.
Does he know the process of cleaning up after a spill? Does he know to get a cloth from? Because if he doesn't, then you come downstairs flustered, having dealt with the other children, and oh my gosh, there's milk all over the floor, and that's just another thing for your stress. So it's definitely going back to the preparation of the environment that's been the biggest win in my house.
And then as Jess says, sorry, I probably will add, it's then that communication. Like, I've set this up for you, that I think I expect you can do it now. But actually, do I know that you provided the opportunity to tell me if you can or you can't, or if it makes sense to you? Because we can't help it. We do just put what we know and think's the best way. And if we don't have that two-way, as you touched on, Jess, but sorry, would you like to add some more?
Yeah, I think it's so important. Like, environment dictates behaviour. And so if we can design the environment so that it works for our young people and they're able to, you know, tell us and show us. But also, I think that was such a good point, Britt, like the intrinsic motivation. I think sometimes at first extrinsic, just to kind of get them on board and to kind of, but actually intrinsic, that is the thing that ultimately we all need. And that is the thing that sustains, absolutely. So I often think that's why it's really important to have those conversations. Like, how was that? How did that feel? Like, how, you know, how was it to be ready in time? And so that they can start realizing, actually, yeah, if that felt good. Yeah, it was great to have the time all celebrating, but actually what was the real win was how great I felt being ready for school, or you know, having everything sorted, because we can't help it. And, you know, with dopamine, it is a scale. So the more we do things like the chores and the harder tasks, the washing up, you know, making our bed, sorting out our bag, the more we top up our dopamine, the more we just have fun, the more it depletes it. So actually we're doing our young people a massive favour by teaching that to them so young, that actually that's how you end up feeling great.
And I think a lot of it's thinking of the back to school routine and opportunity. You know, we spoke about it being a new year and, you know, like learning from the summer or that refresh or that starting point. I think for us as adults, parents, teachers, even just, you know, kind of going back to work after the summer, if people here, you know, haven't got families, you know, it's that, you know, change of season as well. It's like there's always, you can always try something new. And I think I've learned this a lot recently, but you know, I'm not working as much, so I do have the space, but I put a lot of pressure on myself that I should have it nailed. That why haven't I, you know, not to call you out, but why haven't I decided that this process that Brit uses, why haven't I figured out that or that works for me? But that's okay. I can be inspired and I can try something. And I've just remembered, you know, thinking of my own experience, I remember someone, such a simple thing. She has a sock box by the front door because she's like, that's always the thing that keeps us, you know, getting your socks. Kids always run off without putting their socks on. And I was like, that's such a simple move. So they just put their shoes and socks on. They're next to each other. And they never are in many homes. I don't know if I've just missed that. But yeah, so it's like actually, what are the little tweaks or trials you can do? And we're all still learning, even though we think we should know it all by now. We don't, because ages change, school years change, transitions happen.
I think that's such an important mindset to stick in, that we don't know it all. Like, it's so important for our young people that we aren't the ones that know it all.
And being honest about that is something quite, I don't like to use the word empowering lightly, but sometimes for me to admit to my children that I don't have all the answers or I don't know, and let's learn together, that's something that I really, you know, do, because I can only be honest with them. And I think that works, and it makes them realize, okay, I'm not striving to be perfect here. I'm just trying to survive, you know, and every day is a school day. It's what my physics teacher used to teach me. And I've said it to myself on rote, like, the whole of my life. There's always room for improvement, and, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it earlier, and I do still think it's that time pressure. And that's what is so horrible about the going back to school, is because you are forced to be somewhere. I know you have to in order for school to function. But again, there's been discussions about that before. Maybe school should start later. Like what we've said, you know, previously about, you know, coming into the classroom with Clare, and maybe the whole class gets up and does 5 minutes of stretches or whatever else. If we could make it a softer start for all of us, I reckon we might actually be much more efficient altogether, and we would have a different, you know, when I do shut my kids down is because the stuff's got to be done in that moment. And that's horrible. And it doesn't make me feel better afterwards, but sometimes it's the only way to get everyone out the door. And I might be out on the street and I might actually be standing there with my watch going, if you're not coming in 5 minutes, I'm gone, you know? And that's the worst. And you get your day has already started off and you're already like, why did that happen?
You're already frazzled and already feeling guilty.
So like what you mentioned, Britt, like about putting the school uniform into their little cubbies or whatever, if we can share that kind of thing with one another, because often it's also just thinking about it. Do we have the time to just, and if someone says to you, why don't you try this? Huge. Like that actually could be a really big thing that could pivot for me and really help my day, right? So I think that's also huge, like that sharing of like what we all do with one another. I kind of wanted to sort of go on to a little bit more of a sort of fun at the end. And I wanted to ask all of you, really, if you were going to be responsible for that school list that's going out now in like September to, you know, the parents with what you need to get for your kids, what item would you be putting on there that isn't on there and that should be on there in your opinion? Don't know who'd like to start. Not putting it on the spot or anything. I would put like, I think like a cool reflection diary in there or something where the kids would be like inspired to sort of tap into how they're feeling and take that home with them, and that be a homework that they can share. That's sort of an idea that I think would be quite cool. But like maybe it's something to do with footwear, maybe it's posture.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't think I'd want to add, because I think the whole point of footwear is that they should be accessories. So I think that I would just encourage schools to remind children that footwear is optional, like it's there for protection, maybe comfort in certain circumstances, but I think that all classrooms should have a box by the door of footwear, because what do we need shoes on in the classroom for? Even indoor shoes, like why? So I just want teachers to encourage their children to relax and be comfortable. So have the shoes by the door and there's no pressure on footwear.
Amazing. What about you, Jess? Any ideas?
I think I'd go a little rogue, but a little left field, as you're probably expecting. And I think I would give, like, maybe every young person and every teacher some either love hearts or stars. And whenever they see something amazing happening, their job is to go up and give the love heart or the star and say what they saw that really meant something to them.
That's really sweet. And Claire?
I would give every kid a bouncy ball because you can use it to release off the tension in your feet and across your whole of your body. But it's also quite fun to play with as well.
Jenny, I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Oh, I was like too busy listening to everyone else with wonder. I don't know. I might need to edit one in. Hang on. Did you?
I was also thinking about the sports kits, and then my daughter really, really struggles with the sports kit being like so uncomfortable.
Yeah, mine was going to probably be like uniform. I'm actually I don't mind uniform. I'm quite supportive. I don't really have a strong view. I think it makes life easier, and I think it helps with, I'm not against uniform, but I think simplify it personally. And yeah, just make it as comfortable as possible. I remember when I was a kid in the first school I went to, albeit it was in a hot country, it was just polo shirt and comfy shorts, and I've been one to, I've got a really dinky boy, and he could never have worn the school trousers because they just didn't do it in his size, and he would have just looked stupid in them from a section. I'm sorry, but I always put him in tracksuit, like tracksuit bottoms, as great and smart, but I think there should be that flexibility. And I heard something about a school that's going to just only restrict it to 5 branded items. I was like, that's loads. Why does it have to be? I get the uniformity and the identification, but yeah, I think you can still be smart, and it's sort of teach it. Yeah, something around the uniform I would just simplify.
Yeah, and I would also say no light-coloured polo shirts in primary. Why are they not in a colour that hides everything? Or like, I don't know, can you clean them just by rolling something down? It's some kind of material, takes everything off. Anyway, thank you so much. As we wrap up today, it's clear that getting ready for a new school year is about so much more than just crossing those things off the supply list. Whether it's helping kids adapt to long hours at a desk, finding shoes that actually let their feet move properly, or rethinking how we guide our families through the daily rush, the hidden challenge is managing the sheer rigidity of modern school life. The reassuring part is that we don't need a complete life overhaul to make things better. And as our guests have shared today, small, thoughtful shifts, like a quick movement break, choosing a more flexible shoe, designing calmer cues for our routines, can completely change the tone of the school year for our kids and hopefully for ourselves. Thanks to Claire, Brittany, and Jess for joining us today. And thank you to our listeners for giving us your time and attention. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might appreciate it, especially in these calmer weeks before the new school year hits us. And a review, of course, always helps people find these conversations. We're Penny and Jenny, and this has been Perspectives from the Informed Perspective. Keep noticing, keep listening, and stay curious about the world around you. Until the next time, keep informing those perspectives.